So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports. It's great to be with you today. It's the news of the day is the cancellation of the game. I think there's a lot of positive that happened. We're going to talk about some other injuries and some relief pitcher and some streamers to pick up for today. But I thought we'd have to lead off with the Marlins story. And so let's keep our eye on that, keep our eye on the Phillies, see how any reported breakouts go there. Cincinnati, if you remember, Davidson played opening day as designated hitter, then reported that he has been diagnosed or positive for COVID. Mike Moustakas didn't feel well yesterday, did not play. I don't think I've seen confirmation that it's COVID related, but the report I read out of Cincinnati was out of an abundance of caution. Moustakas would not play yesterday, subsequently placed on the 10-day injured list. Nick Senzel, and it's like, what's going to happen to Senzel next, right? So Nick Senzel, he is on the injured list. It could be COVID related. So there are at least 3 possibilities in Cincinnati. Now, let's remember this with COVID. This is the interesting thing with the 10-day IL or whatever IL you're placed on. Once you have 2 negative tests, you can be taken off of the IL, meaning you don't have to wait the requisite number of days if you have 2 negative tests. And I guess maybe you knew that, but if you don't, you know it now. So I'm sure there'll be testing. And if, like in the case of Moustakas, if he can get 2 negative tests, he'll be back with the Reds sooner than later. Not maybe as serious in Cincinnati due to the numbers, but just as serious because we've got to be cautious. We've got to protect. And George Nixon, what is my take on your Phillies this week? We'll get to that in a moment. I'll get to that. How about if I get to it right now? So I'm looking at the questions coming in. The question is about the Phillies. Well, here's my take on the Phillies. As they got Zach Wheeler, I think that's a great move. First of all, I don't think you can put so much stock in early season games the first week of the season. So I think, first of all, I don't care who your team is that you follow. Don't think, the Orioles are 2-1. They're not going to be so bad. Well, they are. They're going to be so bad. It's just Boston's pitching this weekend was absolutely ridiculously awful. The Mariners played well in Houston. The Giants played pretty well in Los Angeles. But I don't think those teams are going to be that competitive year-round. Now, Miami, George, is a little bit of a different bird, a little different flight pattern here for Miami. Now, the problem is now they're not going to be playing. Okay? So, but against the Phillies this weekend, first of all, Sandy Alcantara opening day, Aaron Nola opening day. It was a great pitching matchup. Nola pitched great. Alcantara pitched great. Alcantara could be a number 1 or a number 2 starter on a lot of teams, George. So, don't feel so bad about that loss. Caleb Smith, awful on Saturday. The Marlins just hit the Marlins hit like crazy over the weekend. If you look at the stats, and I'm going to go through a box score from yesterday in just a moment, but the stats on these Marlins, when you look at their batting averages through 3 games, are just absolutely incredible. So let's take a look at yesterday. Marlins went 11-6, George. And when you look at the Marlin batters, you got Dickerson, who's hitting .308. He went 2 for 5 yesterday. Aguilar went 2 for 3 yesterday with a home run, his second of the year, second of the series against Philadelphia. Anderson went 1 for 4 with 3 RBIs. Aishan Diaz went 2 for 5. Rojas, what a weekend. Kid's hitting 700 after 3 games. He went 3 for 4 yesterday. And Sierra went 2 for 3. He's hitting .667. So Do we expect Mel Rojas to hit 700 all year long? The absolute answer is no way. He's not even going to come close to that. He had a great opening weekend, and we've seen that over the years. Team comes out hot. So, George, I think the Phillies are going to be a player throughout the season. Again, I know if you're a Philly fan this morning, you wake up, you look at the standings, you're 1-2, but a lot of teams are 1-2. There are no undefeated teams in Major League Baseball, and so, George, the Phillies are only one game behind the best record in all of baseball. One game behind. So let's don't panic in reality. Let's don't panic in fantasy. I was listening to Lenny talk about Christian Yelich being 1 for 13. The one hit was a home run Saturday. But how many of you guys are cutting Christian Yelich because he started 1 for 13? No one. And because we know as sure as he started 1 for 13, he's going to have a 3 for 4 day, another 3 for 4 day. Bryce Harper hit a laser home run over the weekend. It's going to come around. It's going to equal out. We'll keep our eye. I'm more concerned about the Phillies' health having played the Marlins. I don't want to dwell on that all show, but I'm more concerned about the health of the team having been in contact with those players over the weekend. And I hope that we have good news all week long on players' health everywhere, but especially in Philadelphia. So, what happened yesterday other than COVID? Well, we got 3 starting pitchers who had problems over the weekend who were high draft picks in fantasy. I want to talk about those and talk about, at least in one situation, a possible replacement. I want to go from what I think sounds like the least severe to what could be the most severe playoff-wise. First of all, let's start with Washington and Stephen Strasburg. Strasburg said just hours before his start on Saturday against the Yankees, he had some tingling, some numbness, and that he was scratched from that start. The Nats pull in a starter. They beat the Yankees 9-2. Everything I'm reading, it makes it sound like this is a short-term situation with Strasburg. Might Fetty pitch one more start for him? Surely he might. But I think by maybe next weekend, Strasburg should be back. I don't think anything drastic is happening there. I know he was not placed on the IL. So it looks like all signs are pointing to Strasburg returning sooner than later. The other 2, though, concern me a lot. And I guess the question is, which one do you feel is more serious, an elbow or a shoulder? I think they're both serious. And in the case of Corey Kluber, who had stiff shoulder on Saturday, or Sunday rather, and did not start his game, I'm really concerned. First of all, we know the last time we saw Corey Kluber, he did not look like Corey Kluber. He did not look good at all. He had a bad start to a year last year, finally shut down with injuries, has not pitched in about over a year really, and didn't pitch yesterday after being slated to start. So I'm really concerned about the shoulder of Kluber. You know, I don't know who Texas has that can come in and take his place right away. They filled in yesterday. Palumbo, I mean, it could be anyone. But the Houston situation to me is much more serious. First of all, the Oakland A's are for real. Second of all, Texas has a really good team. Now, I know Kluber going down will affect Texas, but they are better than they were. Their bullpen is better than it was. And so now we've got Houston losing Verlander for probably at least 4 weeks, if not 5. Remember, this is a 9-week season. So you're talking about no Verlander in Houston for at least half of the season. I know he's a tough son of a gun. I know, yeah. If anybody will come back and pitch this year, it will be Justin Verlander. No doubt about it. But it's an elbow. And remember, he had problems early in the spring. And now he's trying to come back from this situation. If you look at that Astros rotation and you take Verlander out of it, you're left with Lance McCullers and you're left with Zach Greinke as established starters. McCullers, not really that established. He's had injury problems throughout his career. He did look pretty good against Seattle on Saturday. But those will be your two primary pitchers. And who will Houston utilize to take that role of Verlander? I'll give you two possible candidates, and there could be more. Remember, Brad Peacock, who has in the past slid into a semi-starter, semi-reliever role, he's on the IL, so he's not a consideration right now. But I think two players are. The one with the most upside, and a year ago, 2 years ago, you would have said been automatic, would be Forrest Whitley. And the problem with Forrest Whitley is Forrest Whitley. He just has not performed up to expectations. He did perform better last year, the latter half of his Double-A season. I don't know if Houston is ready to say to Forrest Whitley, hey, we're going to give you this opportunity, go out and pitch. I think he's the dark horse. I think the more likely candidate to move into Verlander's spot in the rotation is a young pitcher that I saw pitch at high A last year. He made it up all the way to Triple A last year, and that's Christian Javier. Christian Javier, a hard-throwing right-hander. Frankly, he's imposing on the mound. Has a very live fastball, very good slider. I could see Javier going into the rotation, giving him a little rope now. You got to remember, this will be a rookie. But I think he has the ability to perform in that role. He's no Verlander. And Houston will take a hit on this one. Because you know if they were to have any kind of slide, it was always like, let's bring Justin in, he'll stop the slide. He's not there to bring in anymore. So I'm looking at Christian Javier as a possible pickup. Forrest Whitley, a dark horse, but either one of those, don't be surprised if they're not given an opportunity to fill in for Verlander while he's out. And it could be, as you read initially, an all-season long injury. I think best case scenario is 4 to 5 weeks, but it could be all season. So if you have Verlander on your team, what do? If you have an IL slot, it's really easy. It's easy in that you just put him on the IL. But if you don't have an IL slot, do you trade him? Do you just stash him away? It's a tough decision. And maybe, here's what I suggest you do. Hold him for a couple of weeks. In a couple of weeks, we're going to get reports on Verlander. We're going to know more about his situation. And then we can make decisions on where we are. But I would not go out right now and cut a player like Verlander. I don't know that I'd trade him because you're going to get nickels on the dollar. But let's wait a couple of weeks and then make that decision. So let's talk about closers. I don't draft closers in fantasy very hard. I think, and I'm going to tell you why with this, what I'm getting ready to talk about next. It just seems like closers are such a flux position. You never know who's going to close next. Yesterday in Toronto, if you were watching the game, Toronto and Tampa, Ken Giles comes in the ninth inning. He had grimaces on his face. He struggled. He came out with 2 out in the ninth. This morning it's reported he's going on the IL. There's an elbow issue. I really fear the worst there. And so who's going to become the closer now in Toronto? And a lot of you guys, if you drafted closers, you probably drafted Giles up near the top of the list. He had a great year last year statistically. He was one of the top 2 or 3 closers in Major League Baseball. He's gone, and now we got to find who's going to take his place. I'm going to suggest if you are in a league where it's a deep league, you might want to take a look at a player named Anthony Bass. Anthony Bass pitched the 8th inning yesterday. It appears that he would be the pitcher in waiting to assume the job in Toronto. If not, maybe Rafael Delis. He pitched the 7th inning yesterday. It could be a floating situation. You could have Rafael Delis one day. You could have Anthony Bass another. Nothing's been set in stone yet. If I'm gambling on one or the other, I'm going with Anthony Bass. That's right. That's who I'm going with in fantasy. I think Bass will be the first man up to get the opportunity to be the closer in Toronto. What about what happened Saturday in Kansas City? I talked about it a little bit yesterday with the starting pitcher. I'm not going to repeat my show from yesterday. I want to talk about the bullpen. When Brady Singer came out of the game, pitched a whale of a game Saturday, what did they do? Well, they brought in last year's closer in the 6th inning. And then who became the closer Saturday was Greg Holland.